Yes. Don't just fart your page out there that you did not do yourself. Don't make your own thumbnail. I wish they would call it like hard mode. Like, do you want to do hard mode? Check the box. And you're like, yeah, I would. I'll do it. Just based on the research that I've done, it's about selling $8,000. You don't want the internet man to yell at you. The internet man is the worst.
Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey. So here's a very special video. I've got with me a very special guest who is going to walk us through what it takes to find success on Steam nowadays. This video is a must-watch if you're making games with the goal of finding success. Marketing is something that a lot of people find very difficult and don't even know where to start. So over here in this video, this will give you an excellent quick overview of what you need to know. A lot of what I personally know about marketing, I learned it from Chris. I've been reading his stuff for many years, reading the blog posts and newsletter, and it has helped me out a ton. The knowledge that I learned from him is how I'm able to make successful and profitable games, even as Steam has gotten quite a bit more crowded. So I definitely have real-world experience of how much marketing matters and the things that Chris is teaching. In this video, Chris is going to give a high-level overview on how to do Steam marketing, and then after his presentation, I will ask him many of the common game marketing questions that you probably would like to ask yourself, like for example, how many wishlists should I have, when to start marketing, and should I do early access? This is a pretty long video and it has a wealth of knowledge. I really hope you watch the whole thing and learn a lot from it. There's timestamps in the video, and if you find this special video helpful, definitely go ahead and hit the like button. Then afterwards, if you want to keep on learning all about marketing, Chris is currently running a sale on his courses. If you want to get a ton of marketing knowledge in a really condensed form, then I highly recommend you pick up his Wishlist and Visibility Masterclass. It teaches you how the Steam algorithm works, it teaches you how to create a great Steam page, what makes a great demo, how to contact the press, and so on. And basically how to do all of this without spending thousands on a PR company. So check it out with the link in the description. The sale ends next week, so definitely get it quickly. I'm collaborating with Chris to teach you about marketing. The course links are affiliate links, so if you pick it up through that link, you get an awesome course with a ton of knowledge at a great discount, and you're helping support the channel. Then as a bonus, stay tuned for a feature video doing Steam page reviews, and also a live stream answering all of your questions on next Monday. Okay, so without further ado, let's hear from Chris on how to find success on Steam. All right, so hey Chris, welcome. Go ahead, introduce yourself and what do you do?
Hey, thanks for having me, Hugo. My name is Chris Zukowski. I run a site called How to Market a Game, and basically every single week I write a quick blog post studying the Steam marketplace to see what is actually helping people market their games. I look at games that have succeeded and I break down their strategy step by step. These are real stories, these aren't theories or anything. I also do broad based surveys and data analysis where I like scrape data from Steam or I go to data that has been scraped by somebody else. And I just kind of look at market trends and see what's going on so that you can actually market your game, get it seen, get it sold, and actually do this for a full time living.
All right, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I have to say that I myself, I've learned quite a lot by reading your blog, by reading the newsletter. I've been reading it for many years, and a lot of what I know about marketing came from reading you. So thanks for doing that. All right, so yeah, so I guess we're going to start off with a quick presentation, like a high-level overview on the things must know about Steam game marketing, and then I'll ask a bunch of follow-up questions. So, yep, go ahead.
Sounds great. Yeah. So, as Hugo mentioned, I do this professionally and I teach others. And the way I do that is I create this course, this online course called How to Market a Game, Wishlist and Visibility Masterclass. We've probably got a link down below for this thing. As part of this, what I teach is really how to market your game. And the way that it works is a lot of indies get frustrated because they're always like, tweeting, or they always post on Reddit and it goes nowhere. Like, it's like, what else do I need to do? And really, what a lot of indies don't understand, or it's not as apparently visible, is the real strategy for how you do this. And I'll kind of break it down. Is basically the underlying thing is you by yourself just tweeting out into the void is not enough to actually just market the game. Like, not enough people can see your tweets or your Reddit posts or whatever platform you do. You need somebody else to help you boost that up. And the primary way that actually works to actually get visibility on your game are a couple ways. The first is online festivals. These are festivals where you apply, they feature your game on the front page of Steam because Steam features these all the time. And then all these people are going through Steam. They see this big banner that says, hey, like Builder Festival, and you're making a city builder. And you click and you go in and you have your game right there on the top. Now, these festivals run all the time, and my community manages a list where we find these festivals. People come to me, people are starting to come to me who organize these festivals and say, hey, Chris, can you feature this festival? We're doing this type of festival. And so what you do is you just track it. You subscribe to my newsletter or my Discord. I guess we'll put a link down below. and you just get notified when a new festival. And if it applies to your game and your situation, you just apply for it, hopefully get in. That is a huge way to get wish lists. The second way is from streamers, just like Hugo, but mostly the general audience that makes that plays games and sends those to a general audience. Hugo, you're great, but it's more for developers. We're talking let's players, and the big ones are like Splattercat, Northern Lion, Iron Pineapple. If you're making a Souls-like game, these streamers bring in so much traffic. And sometimes people trip over the term streamer. I just mean somebody who plays games online. That could be YouTube or Twitch, but YouTube really provides more traffic, I find. And so basically, you take your game, you give it to them, and they play it, and then you get tons of wish lists. It doesn't necessarily lead directly to sales. A lot of people think that streamers, once your game goes on sale, is going to lead to a big cash influx. It does not. Typically, what happens is you give it to them, you get a ton of wish lists, and then the next time your game goes on discount, then a lot of those wish lists will convert. About 20% of those wish lists, if it's a good streamer. So the combination of those two things are the primary way that most games get visibility on Steam. It is not you just sending out little tiny tweets here and there. It really takes these big efforts. And so it's about just knowing where these places are, how to apply, and what you need to do to get that visibility. And somebody always asks too with streamers, hey, how do I get streamers to play my game? It's very simple. If your game is interesting, you have to have a good Steam page with great graphics, looking good, a good thumbnail that you did not do yourself. Don't make your own thumbnail because you need a professional illustrator to make something interesting. Because YouTubers live or die by their thumbnail. I'm sure Hugo knows that. If your thumbnail is not good, people don't click and watch your video. So streamers need good graphics for that thumbnail. And if your page has a great thumbnail, streamers are more likely to play your game because they say, that looks like a great thumbnail. All I have to do is copy that, put that in, put my face on it, and then we're good to go. But if you have an ugly thumbnail, now the streamer's like, oh, well, God, I got to go find somebody to make a thumbnail for me out of a screenshot. They have to do more work. They want good graphics, good thumbnails. And then two, what you got to do is put up your demo. Now, this is an important thing. Too many people skip this step. You want a nice demo that's really fun and you keep it up. And all you do is you message the streamer and you say, hey, I'm making this game. You play this type of game. I think you're going to like this. You grab your thumbnail, say, here's my thumbnail. You grab a link to your demo. So demo's live now. You can play it right now. And you send that off to the streamer. If they like your game, they will play it. Now, a lot of people say, well, Chris, I tried all this and nobody responded. It must be going to spam. It did not go to spam. It's just that streamers don't have enough time to play every game that comes across their desk. So they don't write no, not because they hate you or they're afraid to tell you no. It's just a list that they have of games that they're kind of interested in playing. And if a hot one comes in, it just cuts in front of you in line because the streamer's like, oh, I got to play this new game. And yours just gets bumped down. So it's not that they don't like your game. It's just that you're not as exciting as the other games that came in. That's why they don't say no to you and say, oh, I'm not going to cover this. Nobody says no. It's just if you've been sending out the emails and you're not getting responses, maybe it's time to either zhuzh up the Steam page, make it look a little bit more exciting, tighten your pitch, tighten your demo, and then you'll start to get those responses from streamers. So that's the big things that I would say that you really need to get going is get a demo out. And the earlier the possible to get that demo out, because you need those streamers to play it, not at launch, not when you're launching your game. You want those streamers to play it nice and early because that'll increase your wish list influx. You'll also have more chances at getting into festivals. And a lot of streamers look at festivals for finding games that they play on stream. So the combination of those two is really how most games get their visibility and take off. That is what it takes to market your game on Steam. So, Hugo, I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
All right, yeah, that was awesome. That was a great high-level overview of how marketing works. Marketing is really basically just the study of attention, how to get people to pay attention to your game. Because basically, what I always say is, it makes no sense to spend so much effort on your game and spend no effort on actually trying to market it. So I feel that is, especially nowadays with so many games coming out, everything is so crowded. If you're going to put in so much effort into making something really special, then I think it also makes sense to put in a ton of effort making people actually know that your awesome thing exists. All right, so yeah, I definitely do have a bunch of awesome questions, and it's awesome how you mentioned a bunch of things like festivals and demos. I definitely want to get to those. But before, let's actually start off with the simplest one of all, which is how many wish lists should I have before release?
Yeah, minimum. absolutely minimum, I say, is 7,000. And the reason I say this is the way Steam's visibility algorithms work, all these algorithms, is it's kind of like a ladder. If you, each step gets you enough visibility to qualify you for the next step and the next step and the next step. And the way the Steam works, just by happenstance, their first kind of rung on that ladder is what we call popular upcoming. So about a week before you release, Steam looks at all the games that have somewhere around 7,000. So I've seen some games get in with 5,000. It depends on how many other games are launching. Some games with 6,000. And if they see, they just pull that list. They say 1 week out, the algorithm just goes out. Oh, these are all the games that have 6,000, 7,000 wish lists thereabouts. Here, let's put them in a list. And they just rank you based on your exact time that you release. So if you say 12:01 a.m. on this day, well, you're going to be at the top of the list. And then it goes down from that. So that list, there's 10 games in that popular upcoming, and they show up. And then as new games are reaching, after new games release, they pop off the list and the next game in the list pops up. So it just is a constant flowing list of games in that popular upcoming. And it gives you a ton of visibility. By a lot of measures, we see that games that are on there get about 1,000 wish lists a day. And so if you time it right, you can end up in there 4 days, 5 days if you play the game right. So then that's the week just before launch. And then from there, if you convert those wish lists and a lot of people buy, the next step on the ladder is what we call new and trending. And so you have to sell a bunch of sell a bunch of copies within a short period of time. Just based on the research that I've done, it's about selling $8,000 gross revenue. This is the pre-Steam cut, pre-taxes, just raw $8,000 earned. That's usually pretty competitive to end up on new and trending. And just like popular and upcoming, your game just stays on there until more games pop it off, as games release and sell $8,000 within a short period of time. They start bumping you off, and you just stay on there. And so that combo, those are the first two steps of the ladder. And there's other things like discovery queue that if you convert well and you have a ton of visibility, they will give you a spot in this widget called discovery queue. So those combination of those three kind of are the start of the visibility ramp on Steam on once you launch your game. Now, if you miss that, like you don't get that 7,000, then it's really hard to climb that ladder. So if you don't get enough wish lists at that time, you're not on popular upcoming. And then it's really hard to get those last minute wish lists, those 1,000 per day. You don't get those. And then it's hard to convert enough of those wish lists to show up on new and trending. So you can just see the ladder start just going away if you don't start making those steps up the ladder. So that's why I say 7,000 minimum to get in there. Now,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
so
put
that
another
number
caveat on
is
that.
not necessarily set in stone, right? It's like you were saying, it depends on what other games are coming out around that time. So it might be 7,000, 5,000. So basically, there's no magic number written directly in the Steam algorithm saying if above 7,000, go here. If not, go there.
Yeah, it's a little bit wobbly. So one thing that I like to recommend people is look at your game, go to SteamDB on your game, and you'll see a ranking if you're ranked. And usually the ranking happens right around 7,000 wishlists. See, it's all relative to all the other games on Steam. What Steam's actually doing is they're just pulling the most wishlisted games that release that week. Okay, and so when you look on SteamDB, if you have enough wish lists right around 5,000, 7,000, it'll say rank number. And it'll say, like, you are number 5,000 in wish list. That means of all the games on Steam, and it's usually like the first 2,000 is when you get the number assigned to you because there's so many games on Steam, that the top 2,000 games that have not yet released get a rank number. If you have a rank number, that means you're a pretty good shot of getting on new and trending, or popular upcoming, I should say, popular upcoming. Because I think the algorithm actually just says how many games show me all the ranked games that have a release date within the next week. That's, I think, what the algorithm does. So sometimes if there aren't a lot of games that are out there, you can get in that ranked number with fewer wish lists. That's the kind of why we're saying there's no full number. It's kind of like everybody's running in a race together and they just pick the top front of that race.
All right, yeah. So yeah, basically, roughly have 7,000 in order to get on that. Basically, start the ball rolling, and then Steam. Basically, you got to kick off the Steam algorithm, and once it starts, then it starts basically working for you. But you have to first get the initial thing. So yeah, that's a great one.
Let me just put one more. Let me just say one more caveat to that. Now, this is one thing that I often hear because I talk to a lot of indies, so I hear a lot of the comments. Some people might say, "Well, I heard about 30,000 wish lists or 50,000 wish lists." Some people say that. Now, what this is coming from is typically publishers. If you sign with a publisher, your publisher really wants you to get to 30,000 or 50,000, somewhere in that range, depending on the publisher. The reason that is because remember I said there was that new and trending where you have to get $8,000 within like the first 24 hours, like within a short period of time. Well, publishers have been around enough and they know that to get to 8,000 sales, your wish lists have to convert, enough wish lists have to convert, and they want that kind of buffer. So if you could convert at 20%, like all your wish lists convert at 20%, 20% of all the wish lists you earned convert. That's awesome. But some games have a little softer. They only convert at like 5% or 1%. I've seen games that do all those range. Anywhere between 1 to 30% I've seen. And so if it turns out by whatever factor your game is a low converter like 1,000, when you have 30,000 or 50,000 wish lists, that just gives you a bigger margin of error so that those 1% of 30,000 will give you enough sales to get you into new and trending. So you see, there's no line in the algorithm that says if you do this, you do that. It's more, they just kind of look at conversion rates and that because it really just, you need that buffer to earn that money. And that's why publishers will say, oh, you need 50,000 or 30,000. Not because that's a solid number in the algorithm, just because that is more likely to give you enough sales and enough dollar earned to rank on new and trending. So it's complicated, but it's not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's great extra information. Yeah, definitely. Basically, the idea of a buffer zone and conversion rate. Yeah, that is definitely also important. So yeah, second very important question: when should I start marketing my game?
Yeah, I personally like to do it immediately.
So what? As soon as I've got a game idea, or need to have something visible?
Here's what I recommend is I've got 3, sometimes 4, depending on if I ate breakfast that day. Recommendations of when you're ready to start marketing your game. And by marketing your game, I'm specifically talking about putting up a Steam page that says wish list now. And here's kind of my rules. One, you definitely know what type of game it is. You're like, sometimes maybe you're like, well, maybe it's going to be an action RPG. Maybe it's going to be a roguelike. Maybe it's just going to be a linear narrative game. All of those could be like a 2D game or a Metroidvania or a roguelike, action roguelike. Sometimes that kind of changes during development. When you are sure, you're like, this is definitely a Metroidvania. There's no doubt about it. I'm making a Metroidvania. That's first step. Second step is your graphic style has to be decided. And by decided, I mean, like, oh, we're definitely going cartoony. We're going to look, it's going to have big blobby features, all that kind of stuff. Or you're like, I'm going to go grimdark. Everything's going to be black and white and covered in blood. Whatever it is, you've picked the actual art style that you're going to go with. Okay. Third thing you need is I recommend 4 different environments, 4 different biomes, 4 different, just scenes so that it looks unique. The main thing that I see the problem that indies, when they first throw up their first Steam page, is I can tell you made one environment and you just shifted the camera around
Yeah.
and I can see everything in the background's the same. Like there's a tower in the back and I can tell in one screenshot the tower's over here, then the same tower's over here, then the tower's here. I can tell you just kind of like pan the camera around the same one office or the one, like level area. That's not going to cut it with Steam. You need different environments, different levels, like snow biome, fire biome, the forest. You want different things. Now, I know you're still in development. You can mock this up. They're just screenshots. So I recommend you just make the art in the right art style and you stage it up like in Unity or whatever you're using so it looks like a different scene. It doesn't have to function. If it could be like I just run through the tree and it just doesn't clip, or the enemies are just like still but they're posed. It's just a screenshot. They don't need to know that there's no AI or the thing's not coded. You just have to stage it. Don't lie, but just stage it so it looks unique. And then from there, the last thing that I always recommend is a trailer. You really should have a trailer because it means you're serious. The other reason I say you need a trailer when you kind of do this announce is a big marketing beat. Remember how I said you need external people, streamers, festival goers, sometimes the press, YouTubers. A big marketing beat when you kick off your game is your announce trailer. So you make a trailer, you title it announce trailer, and you put it out there and you reach out to like IGN and streamers and the press and say, here's my announce trailer. Just saying announce trailer makes people stand up and go, I must cover this game. So that's why I say you should also have a trailer. So those 4 things, a known genre, you know what your genre is, you know what the art style is, you've made enough screenshots for 4 environments, and you have a trailer. Those are the 4 things to actually start marketing your game.
Okay, that's interesting. So basically you would say it's not necessarily recommended to just basically have just screenshots, no trailer, just a rough idea, just you know what the game is going to be, but you haven't yet made a nice polished trailer. So you would say better to wait for it and really kick off with a, like you said, a nice marketing beat as opposed to just make this coming soon page live. You would say wait for a proper marketing beat.
Yes, don't just fart your page out there. Don't just like, nah, it's a Thursday, I'm gonna put a lot to it. No, it has to be a big moment. So you start working with either content creators like on TikTok, or maybe you reach out to IGN, find IGN, say, we have a secret trailer. We are getting ready to announce our game. Do you want to have exclusive access? And you send them their trailer, and they're like, this trailer is good. Like you do this like a month before you're going to announce. Or, you know, how I said those festivals, you reach out to the festival organizers. You look at my website, howtomarketagame.com/festivals is the festival list. You look at that festival list and you see what's coming up, and you start applying to festivals, even though you don't have a Steam page yet, with your trailer, and you say, "We're getting ready to announce this game. Can we get into into your festival?" You would get the announce of our game in your festival, and then the organizers are like, "We get this special moment where we get to announce this person's game. We're definitely going to feature them in the thing." So again, you see how you're using the fact that nobody's heard about you, and then all of a sudden something will be heard as a special ticket, and you're going around to a bunch of people and saying, "Do you want to cash this ticket? You get to cash it. Who wants to cash it?" And then somebody says, "I do." If you just fart your page out, you just put it up for no reason, you don't have a trailer, you just took that ticket and just crumpled it up and threw it on the ground. You know what I mean? So use that ticket. It's given to you.
Okay, so yeah, so basically the announcement should be a nice, important thing to kick things off nicely. So yeah, I mean, you spoke about festivals, so just a quick question: should you participate in a Steam festival? I mean, nowadays things are quite a bit more crowded, but do you still think it's a good idea? And basically, when should you participate?
Yeah. So there's several types of festivals, and I'll just clarify this. The big one is Steam Next Fest, and there's nothing special about Steam Next Fest. It's actually very crowded right now. The main reason people always talk about Steam Next Fest is it's one that everybody's guaranteed. Everybody who has a Steam page can do one and only one Steam Next Fest, and you get to choose when you want to do it. It's like having one bullet that you get to fire. Everybody gets to fire their one bullet. But you can only do it February, October, and June. I don't know why I did them in that order, but that's not the order. But there's 3 of them per year: February, June, October. Those are the 3 dates. And so you get to pick which one of those 3 you want to do. Now, it is crowded. Definitely is. And I just published a blog post. If you go to howtomarketagame.com/blog, you can see my latest one. It's about Xavier Nelson Jr. And what they did was they basically said, we're going to do our Steam Next Fest right off bat. And what they did was they knew they were getting a huge boost from being in a game show like Jeff Keighley's festival. And they just paired it with Steam Next Fest. See, because he knows when he can fire that bullet, he said, I'm gonna use it strategically and use my one time to pair it with this big festival announce. And he announced his game. So he was basically firing 3 bullets at the same time. All the other festivals that I list at howtomarketagame.com/festivals, all those festivals are just random. You don't know if you're going to get to them. You apply and you get in. They might like your game, they might not. So that's why we spend extra time talking about Steam Next Fest, but all the other festivals change. Sometimes the festivals have nobody else in them. It's like 50 games get in. It's a very exclusive festival. Some games like everybody gets in. It's like there's 2,000 games in the festival. It just depends. And there's also themed festivals. There's like cozy games. And if you're in a cozy game, it's usually smaller and the audience is like very dedicated. They love every cozy game. They wishlist every single one. They buy every single one. There's like narrative game festivals like Ludo, Narracon. So if you're writing a adventure game or a visual novel, those do very well because again, that audience is very tuned in. But if it's a general festival like, I don't know, action games, that's so broad and there's so many different types of people that those don't convert as well. But here's the thing: I still, even if the festival only got you 100 wish lists and they convert poorly, hey, that's 100 wish lists and a poorly converting wish list that you didn't have at the beginning. There's no downside to participating in a festival other than maybe the time to kind of like manage, the upload and applying, and maybe if you did a custom demo for them. Some of them do have a little bit of a cost. It's usually not too much. It's usually like in $100 to $1,000, but the visibility they give you is very good. So anywhere in that range, there's really no big downside to participating in a festival.
Okay, yeah, festivals do seem to be a big part of marketing games nowadays. So yeah, that was definitely very helpful. Now, one question that I really want to ask you, which is actually something that I saw on a blog post that you made quite a while ago, is how basically it was a graph of how many games a studio makes and how like so many studios make one game, very few studios make the second, third, and so on. So basically, my question is, would you recommend someone spends, let's say, 5 years working on just one game, trying to make like one huge masterpiece? Or in those same 5 years, make five different games. Which one would you recommend?
Hugo, you're a man in my heart. Okay, so my basic complaint for all indies out there is that you spend way too long working on your first game or any game. And I know it sounds easy. It's easy for me just to say you spend too long on it. What we found was about 75% of studios will release one game and then nothing else. I don't know what happens to them. Some of them go off and make a second studio or something, but this is data that I scrape from Steam. The number of studios who have released two games is very, very small after that. It's like 7,000. So I think it's like, down to like 10% of studios will actually make two games. And then it goes down even further, like 0.1% or something release three games. And it just even further and further. Um, but here's the thing, most of your success happens in your second and your third and your fourth because games roll forward. So even if your first game didn't do very well, there's still a lot of people who bought it, who are wishlisting it. And there's some people that love you. They like, man, this is one of my favorite games. I know it didn't sell well, but I love this game. So what you do is you take this audience because every day your game is on the store getting viewed by people when you release. So even if it wasn't a big seller, it's still getting views. And when you release your second game, you take that audience and you put it on there, and then all of a sudden your second game is starting at about here, and then you're building on top of that, and then it's a third game and the fourth game, and so they just stack. And I find that most success comes fourth, fifth game. Now, knowing that, this should change your strategy. If you are thinking, I'm going to make the perfect game, my first game, you will never finish it or you're just going to die, basically. So, what I recommend is don't make your dream game your first game. Just don't. I know a lot of people, I get a lot of emails. I'm working on my dream game. I've always wanted to make this game. I say, I know it's hard, but tuck it away. You're not ready for your first game. Okay. You got to make smaller first games that, hey, you're interested in, but they're not your dream game. And so what you do is you level up and you grow in ability to get to your dream game, like your fourth or fifth release. And then you've got a lot of code base, you know how to make games, like every game has a setting screen. Work on your setting screen your first game and then just use the same setting screen basically for all your future games, saves you dev time, all that kind of stuff. And your audience will grow over time. It's just so much. It is impossible to have your first game succeed. And even if you're like, well, what about this game? Most of the time, if you look back, they've been releasing games for decades. It is very, very, very hard to make your first game a success. So, with that in mind, structure your studio, structure your dev time to release a lot of small games, and each one gets a little bigger until you get to your dream game. Okay? That's my recommendation for indies out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, what you're saying really resonates with me because I definitely do believe in the same way. Make multiple games as opposed to just one huge game. And specifically what you mentioned about reusing things. I mean, for me, something that I always talk about in my channel is all about writing good, clean code so that you can reuse it on many things. Like, for example, I've got my animation system that I made and reused in like 4 or 5 games. So yeah, that is definitely something that I very much believe in. Yeah, and I do think that is the best approach. Okay, so a bit of a potentially similar question. So, what are the best genres on Steam? I mean, I know Steam is huge, but should I make a cozy game? Should I make a dark and moody game? Should I make a survival crafting game, a city builder? What what does the Steam audience generally prefer?
Okay. I'm going to kind of pair these with the previous one because I say, hey, make small games. Just make a quick small game. And then he's like, what the hell? I can't make a small game. What, do you want me to crunch? No, you pick genres that are smaller. Okay. So your first game, I'm sorry, folks, should not be an RPG because those games just have so much content. They're so deep. You just won't be able to finish it in time. I'm sorry. You just can't. Okay. And so what you do is, in the interest of building up a code base and learning how games are designed, because that's a big thing too, just knowing the design of games, like how hard should the game be, how do you tutorialize, that's all things you have to learn by making games. So there are some genres that are pretty simple to make, they do very well on Steam relatively, and they give you that kind of experience, and they could build up to the final game. Because really, like if you think about it, an RPG is really a lot of genres stacked together. It's like, you've got experience, like incremental experience and spending it on upgrades. You've got a narrative, just typing the story, writing out a story as a game. You've got kind of the battle, whatever your battle, whether it's real time or turn based. You've got a battle system. You have like an exploration where you're like exploring the overworld. So that's like 4 or 5 games just for an RPG. This is why you should not make an RPG for your first game, because it's actually like 6 games duct taped together and presented to you. So what I recommend is I study the market all the time, and that's what I write about. Howtomarketagame.com/free is how to sign up for that. But all those genres, there are a lot of genres that are very small and actually are pieces that show up in like an RPG or some of those genres. And let me list them out real quick. So the small genres that I recommend indies start out with is one, like an incremental, like an incrementer, idle game, sometimes called. Those do very well on Steam. Now you might say, "Oh, there's so many garbage ones." If they're good, they go up. And I know Banana, yeah, yeah, yeah. But there's other ones that I'd recommend that you check out, like Chillquarium is one. Micro Civilization is another one. Lo-Fi Beats, I think it's called Lo-Fi Beats. Forget what
Yeah, the one
it's
that
like
is the
Moon
low
City,
file
Lo-Fi
girl,
Beats.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not actually Lo-Fi Girl. I think she's featured in there. But it's an incremental game where if you just idle, if you just concentrate, you do work, your numbers tick up, and then you can buy upgrades for your thing. Those idle games. Research that genre. Look at the top sellers. If you do them right, very positive effect. Oh, another one is Rusty's Retirement. But the good thing about those incrementers is they teach you how XP grows, how to buy upgrades in an interesting way, because you need to do the loop interesting. So it's a very self-contained small game that teaches you the fundamentals and doesn't take as long as a big RPG that's your dream game. But a lot of the code that you use in your incrementer can be adapted for your RPG down the line. And so you might learn, like your first incremental game, people are like, God, this game sucks. It's too slow. And you're like, oh, okay, I got to tune this up. So you learn in your second game, maybe make a second idler. And you're like, oh, I changed the progression so that you earn XP faster. Oh, man. And people are like, that's great. You did it. Good job. Then you take those lessons learned and you apply it to your RPG dream game later on. That's just an example. Another genre that's really big are auto battlers. You basically upgrade a bunch of little units and you say, go get them. And then you don't control it. You just push a button that says go. And then those little units that you've upgraded go and they attack some monsters, and there's some number system that determines who's the winner. That's an auto battler. Very hot genre. Again, you can do it in small bits, and it's like a piece of an RPG. Remember how we talked about battle systems? The lessons that you learn building an auto battler can be applied to an RPG. Third one, narrative games are hard, but there are a couple of genres that actually do pretty well. One is a horror game. Now, most of the time I say that your game has to be deep and systematic. Horror games are games that should be very small, like 2 hours max. And it's usually just a camera rolling around in a spooky dungeon or something, and there's some monster chasing you. It's a great way to learn animation, just how to work a camera system, a little bit of narrative, like they click something and it tells a little story on there, but it's like dark and brooding. Those are excellent games, faster development time, and people love horror games, especially if your monster's really gross and like their head is sideways, or they're a girl dressed in white and she has black eyes and she screams at you. People love those. That's like an instant like uh, good way to do a horror game. I know I'm seeing it sounds fake and cynical, but this is what the Steam audience wants, are those type of games. And the other genres that do pretty well, that are pretty good, is one is what I call, they don't really have a genre. They're called like these stacking games, and they're these little cards. Stacklands is one. The one that invented it is called Cultist Simulator. Look those up. And they're basically games where you take cards and you stack these cards, and the way you stack them kind of as like building a city, or it's like you're crafting things. Again, this is code that you learn here that can be applied to a bigger game. So these are all genres that are very good and I recommend. Um, Stay away from platformers. Platformers just don't sell very well, especially puzzle platformers. Those sell very, very poorly. Um, and for some reason, indies think that that's their first game. I don't know where that message got out, but they just sell so poorly because people don't like getting stuck in puzzle games. And so, really watch out for those. I know you're probably watching this and you're like, I'm just making a puzzle platformer. Oh, I know it's hard. I made some of my first games were puzzle platforms. They didn't sell well. It's just the nature of it. People just don't like them on Steam. Those previous genres that I mentioned do much better. So if you're making a puzzle platformer, maybe just don't throw it away. Don't blow up your computer. Just put just like do your last commit, start a new one. You know, if you're like, man, I worked 3 years on this thing, I'm so sick of it. Hey, just put it aside. Take a little vacation from your game and make an idler or something. They're just so much more popular. I see it. It's like night and day popularity between those games. And you're gonna love game dev again if you start making a genre that Steam loves.
Yeah, I was gonna say my next question was going to be, so many indies start with platformers, so should I do a platformer? So apparently the answer is no. But yeah, a lot of indies definitely do start start with that, and yeah, it's a very tricky. And another thing that I've almost already heard you say several times is how horror is supposedly a great genre because it's very simple to make something, and it really just needs something a little bit interesting, as long as it has a little hook, something that is slightly different. It doesn't have to be super complex. And yeah, I've definitely personally, I have to say for me, horror is not the kind of games that I don't like to play. I get scared way too easily. But your comments on the genre definitely made me slightly convinced that I should probably give it a try because yeah, it seems like a seems like it can be a good genre.
Here's one thing. A lot of people wonder about that. Like, "Oh, I don't like horror." Horror sells so well, so well, and you don't even have to be a fan to make a horror game. And let me explain. I'm a big film buff. I love movies. I'm always reading about film and stuff like that. I love movies. Um, One of the best horror films ever made, The Shining, made by Stanley Kubrick. That guy didn't even like horror movies. He only made The Shining because his previous movie that he made was a total flop. Nobody liked it. He's like, God, these horror movies are always hits. I need a hit. I'm going to make the best horror movie ever. I don't even like them. And so he read all these horror books and he's like, I hate this book. I hate this book. And then he found The Shining. He's like, this is a good story. And he decided to make The Shining, this classic horror film, just because he wanted a hit. And I feel like this is very similar to indies. They're like, I'm sick of making these puzzle platformers that never sell. I'm sick of it. Fine, I'm just going to make a horror game. And they do amazingly well. You don't have to be like the biggest horror fan. But one thing I do recommend is play a couple horror games. I know it might be scary, but put on your designer hat like, I'm not scared. I'm just investigating the design. And look at really how horror games are built, like why they work. Now, I know a lot of indies, they try and make a horror game, but they like bring in this like game designer brain where they're like, well, it's not actually a horror game. It's more of a card battler where your systems are the horror. And they add all these extra systems. No, 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 no. Just make it a straight up horror game where it's like, I'm just a dude running through some dark corridors and there's a girl dressed all in white and her eyes are black and like bleeding and she screams at me. Like, just make a freaking horror game that's like a real horror game. Don't try and like overcomplicate it with all these game design systems that don't belong in a horror game. It just got to be scary. Just make it scary.
Okay, yeah, maybe I should try that. Okay, so yeah, in terms of let's say that I'm prototyping, I'm trying to figure out, so I'm trying to follow your guide on trying to choose a genre that is good for Steam and trying to wait a little bit before making my big marketing push announcing the game. So in between that point, in between making a prototype until I'm sure that I know my idea, how should I validate that idea? Should I like post gifs on Twitter, something like that? How do I test? Do I know, okay, this genre, this idea is potentially viable, so I'm going to push through it?
Yeah, yeah. So what I search on my blog, howtomarketagame.com, search genre. I've done a lot of genre reports. Also, because we're doing this as part of the summer sale, if you click the link down below, I do this every year. I do this lecture series where I look at the previous year and I look at the genres that are hot and I track it every time. Because one thing, anytime I talk about a genre that's hot, people are like, well, it's hot this year. Was it hot last year? What's changing? It doesn't change that much. That's a big myth that a lot of indies fall for. Or they get too scared of. They think, oh, well, the genres change so fast. They don't actually change too fast. because the biggest genres are strategy games, horror games, civilization, like 4X style games, first person shooters. Those genres have been popular since way back in when I was like 16 years old. I used to play so many city builders, strategy games, and first person shooters. Guess what? They're still hot. But anyway, so I talk about in that class. It's called Game Marketing Ideas. You'll see the last 2 years of lectures where I go by straight down the line of what genres are selling on Steam. So that's one resource, and Hugo, you and I have collaborated. If you buy it, Hugo gets a nice little present for for helping do that. So you're supporting Hugo by picking up Game Marketing Ideas. But in general, it's hard, and this is why I do what I do. It's hard. You can kind of lie to yourself that a genre is hot when you look at the data, because you'll find one that succeeds. And what I really try and do, and I try and look at the medians of several genres and compare them, and I look across so many different things like streamers. So it is you can do it. I just recommend that you don't look at just the winners, because every genre has one game that succeeds. The difference is genres have a huge range of sales. Some sell very well, some don't. And so what I recommend is really looking across the time. And that's kind of why I do the writing. So if you search my blog for a genre, you'll see what I recommend are the top genres. And then from within that data that I've presented, you can kind of pick games that are the games that speak to you, because this is games. It should still be fun for you. So if there's genres that you just absolutely don't like, or actually are like kind of interested in, you're like, oh yeah, that does sound interesting. Then you can try those and see if you actually they make a good fit for you. So that's kind of how I'd recommend picking a game. Now to your question, Hugo, about how do you validate? One way to validate, yes, is share it on Twitter. Like say, hey, here's my monster, and show a picture of your monster and see what it is. You can do the trailer, but here's the problem: is for the most part, 99% of games don't impress just with their visuals. Most of them impress with their gameplay. So it's kind of a hard thing. I recommend you make a demo much earlier than most people expect. So you try with some screenshots and some video, of the game being played. And most of the time, you won't get any good data out of that, because it has to be a very, very, very good looking game to go viral on social media. It's not until people play it and you give it to streamers and you enter into festivals with that demo do you start to see, oh yeah, this is getting some numbers. I've seen a lot of games that did poorly on Twitter, but as soon as they put out the demo, the wish list skyrocketed and everybody loved the game. So it's hard to do that early validation and not convince yourself it's a bad idea. It's hard. So I would just recommend make a lot of games, make them quickly, and learn that way.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, playtesting is extremely important. I mean, at the end of the day, we're making games. So yeah, if the game looks great but doesn't play great, then it's not very, it's not a very good game. So yeah, focusing on the playtest, making sure that the game design actually works. Yeah, that is definitely very important. So let's say that I've published my game, or I'm about to publish my game. Should I go with early access or not? Or are there specific genres that should go into early access and some that shouldn't?
In general, if you were just to ask me, Chris, should I do early access? I'd say no. I don't know why. Somewhere it's kind of like platformers. Indies were just inception, like some brainwave came and they said, I've got to make an early access puzzle platformer. I don't know where that came in, but so many indies make puzzle games and so many indies do early access. In general, I don't like early access because I consider it high risk, high reward. The way early access goes is if it goes well, it goes very well. And if it goes poorly, it goes very poorly. And the reason is um, early access, if you don't sell very much in the beginning. I did some analysis. If you search my blog for early access, I found that if you get under 100 reviews, you have like a 1% chance of actually like getting enough sales to justify the game's presence on Steam. Um, it's very hard to work yourself out of a hole in early access. And so the reason I say it's high risk, high reward is if you flub the early access launch. A lot of indies treat early access like I just want to get I just want to get some feedback. I'm just going to put it out in early access, see what people think, and if it does well, then I'll keep working on it. Because a lot of times when you just put it out there early, that's your launch. As soon as somebody can spend money on your game, that is your launch. And you need that seven. You know, how I said you need 7,000 wish lists. You need that for your early access launch. And a lot of indies think, oh, I don't have 7,000. I'm just going to put it out in early access, see what people think. Then I'm going to try for the 7,000. You need that 7,000 for your early access launch. This is why I think early access is so hard, is because you've never, if this is your first game, you need to provide enough content to the game to make it like interesting for people to do early access, for somebody to buy it and say, yeah, this was a good purchase, but not so much content that you spend so long working on it that you're missing out on that time of early access development. It's like you're like threading the needle between two things, and it's so hard. Games alone are hard to make. It's much harder to like thread it between the too early but not too early type of thing. Ugh, no, that's why I say just your first game, just try and get it out there. Because if you fail on your early access launch, it's dead. And then what happens with early access? Because early access is like, hey, come build it with us. You'll get some people on there that are really mean to you. They're like, you released this early access game and I paid money for it and I want updates every single month and and they believe that you owe them constant updates. And so now you're sitting on a game that launched poorly, and you got this weird guy on the internet yelling at you because you're not doing enough updates. That is just a recipe for hating your life. So don't do that. That's why I always recommend your first couple games, don't do early access. But if you are looking to see like what should my numbers be, like am I ready for early access? I talked to a couple developers. One of the interviews that I did for my blog was with Deep Rock Galactic Survivors. They do nothing but early access games, that studio. And they always recommend doing stuff. You need at least 10 to 20 hours of content for your early access launch. So the type of games that do well in early access are these systems driven, procedurally generated games that can just quickly do 10 to 20 hours. And then over the course of early access, by the time of your 1.0 launch, you've got like 30 hours of content. That is the scale of game that does well in early access. So if you're making a puzzle platformer with like 1 hour of content and you're trying to do early access launch, you're going to have poor sales and there's going to be an internet man who yells at you every day. I don't think you want that. That's why I say just put it out on 1.0. Just skip the whole early access thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. And actually, from that,
You don't want the internet man to yell at you. The internet man is the
no.
worst.
So yeah, I guess a follow-up related to the very first question, which is, so you're talking about how in early access, if the early access launch doesn't do very well, it's very hard to kind of go back to it and have a successful 1.0 launch. In the beginning, you were talking about how Steam is like a success ladder, so you got to get 7,000 wish lists to get on the popular upcoming, to then get on new and trending to kind of kick off the algorithm. So basically, I guess the question is, if I have a bad early access launch, what are the odds that I can turn around and make it a successful launch? What are the odds that I can actually kick the algorithm in order to hopefully have a successful 1.0?
It is very rare. I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head. I can actually send you a link, Hugo, after that to put down below to this article. But it is so if you get, let me tell you the upper end. I found that if you have 250 reviews by your launch, like if you do early access and in the first month you get 250 reviews, you have about a 30% chance of having 1,000 reviews by your 1.0 launch. Okay. So 1,000 reviews, by the way, there's nothing in the algorithm. That's just kind of my gauge that, hey, your game did well. It's just a number I picked out and thought 1,000 is a good number. That's a good sign. So even if you do very well, get 250 reviews in your first month of being in early access, you have a 30% chance of succeeding with 1,000 reviews. That is how risky it is. So it is very, and then it goes down sharply after that, under that 250. So if you don't get 250 reviews in your first month on Steam, the numbers are even worse. It's like 1% chance of getting to 1,000 reviews. But check that blog. You'll see the graph that I made. And I got this graph I scraped data from every game that had an early access launch and then went to 1.0. And I just compared the 1 month of early access launch to the 1 month of that 1.0 and compared to see what the differences were and saw how many games actually improved. It is very rare. I think I found like 6 games that beat the odds and had a poor early access launch and then had a good 1.0. It was like 6 games since like 2016. So it is very, 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 very hard to succeed after an early access launch. I am sorry. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, so basically it sounds like early access is very risky and definitely should not be a decision taken lightly. Definitely should focus very hard.
I wish Steam would call it something different than early access. I wish they would call it like hard mode. Like, do you want to do hard mode? Check the box. And you're like, yeah, I would. I'll do it. But when it sounds early access, it just sounds so nice. You're like, oh, early access, it's early. What's so bad about it? No, they should call it hard mode.
All right, so yeah, that was awesome. All those are interesting questions. Those are great answers. So I hope a lot of people found this quite useful. So yeah, Chris, you're currently running a summer sale on all of your courses. So where can people go if they want to learn a bit more, dive deeper into the world of marketing and how to increase their odds of finding success on Steam?
Yeah, like I said, every single one of my courses is on sale, and I'm partnering with Hugo because Hugo, I love your videos. You do the best development videos. I love watching them, and a lot of people that you teach come back to my courses, my community, and say, "Hey, Chris, we heard about you from Hugo, and he's great." And I agree. So I partner with Hugo. So if you buy the courses with the links below, Hugo and I are like sharing. We're just gonna we're like sharing stuff like kids on a playground. So you will help Hugo when you buy one of the courses down below. So I have a course called Wishlist and Visibility Masterclass, and it talks a lot about what I was talking about. But what I do is I do nitty gritty. Like I don't do general like, oh, be sure to tweet about your things that you like. No, it's like hardcore. I tell you step by step what you need to do to succeed on the Steam store. Like down to like the minute sometimes when you do these campaigns. And that's what that course is, the Wishlist and Visibility Masterclass. I also do a conference, so you'll see some called Inside Conference. I've done them for 2 years in a row, and I take the best talks that I've seen the previous year, and I invite those developers, those marketers on, and I ask them questions like, "Hey, how did you actually do this campaign?" So I have like somebody who reaches out to streamers. That's her whole job. And I just asked her, how do you reach out to streamers? And she told me by bullet point how to reach out to a streamer. It's fantastic. It's a great 1 hour lecture. You'll learn more in that 1 hour than you do like in most like college courses. Highly recommend it. We've got what's called the Pitching and Funding Masterclass. So if you're trying to get a publisher, I worked with the best guy, the guy that Jason Della Rocca. He for decades has been teaching indies how to do publishers, like how to reach out to publishers. He and I teamed up, made a course together, so you can check that down below. So I've just got so many different courses. Oh, the inside game marketing ideas. I talked about how every year I look back on the data from the previous year to see what genres are selling and do a big marketing report. That shows up in the inside or the game marketing ideas. So all my courses on discount, and if you buy the bundle, I bought this mega bundle. If you're going to buy the two big master classes, you get everything for just like 25 bucks more. So that's really the best value. But check the links down below. And again, if you buy through these links, Hugo benefits from it. So we're really supporting Hugo by doing this. So thank you so much.
All right, that was awesome. Okay, so thank you so much, Chris, for sharing all the knowledge with all of us here today. Thanks so much.
Great. It's great talking to you, Hugo.